Good morning. Welcome again to Morning Devotions, and thank you again so much for our time together. I want to talk to you today about the fact that location and circumstances do not change the respect that we show for God. Have you ever seen a young man or a young lady who is in a relationship with someone who says they love them, but all of a sudden some friends come around and they treat each other very differently? It's like they're embarrassed in front of their friends. Now, when a young man does that to a young lady, and he's ashamed of you in front of friends, or he's ashamed of you in front of family because maybe you don't have as much money or your family doesn't have the same wealth that their family has, I always tell the young man or the young lady, please, they're not the one. Love doesn't get ashamed of people. You don't treat people differently. You don't act like you love them one minute and then you're ashamed of them the next minute. Have you ever seen people try to treat their boss like their best friend when they're out of the office? They run into their boss in the shopping mall and they walk up and try to act like they're all buddy-buddy with the boss. And you ever notice how flat that falls? Now, in everyday life, we've learned the thought that location and circumstances don't change respect. But it especially is true about our walk with God. I want you to think with me back to the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 5. Now the people of Bethshemesh were harvesting their wheat in the valley, and when they looked up and saw the ark, they rejoiced at the sight. The cart came into the field of Joshua of Bethshemesh, and there it stopped beside a large rock. God brought the Ark of the Covenant back to exactly where He wanted it. The people chopped up the wood from the ark and sacrificed the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. The Levites took down the ark of the Lord and placed it together with the chest containing the gold objects and placed them on the large rock. So God brought it right where He wanted it, a rock where it could be placed on for safekeeping, and Levites were there to handle the Ark of the Covenant. Now, great respect is being shown. I mean, God, the ark has just come back from Dagon's temple, and Dagon kept falling on his face before God. God doesn't share His glory with anybody else, even a demon idol. God will not share His glory. But there were some guys there that thought that, this is my chance, and they wanted to act like they were all that. And we find the story continuing in verse 19. But God struck down some of the men of Bethshemesh, putting 70 of them to death, because they looked into the Ark of the Covenant. The people mourned because of the heavy blow the Lord had dealt them. And the men of Bethshemesh asked, who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God? To whom will the Ark go up to from here? Fascinating story. And people look at it and go, oh, God is just arbitrary and capricious. No, God had always laid out, this is how the Ark is to be treated. People were not to look inside of it. The Levites were to carry it. Later, David had the same problem when one of his guys reached out and grabbed a hold of it to steady it on a wooden cart, because God had never said for it to be carried on a wooden cart. It was to be carried by the Levites. So when the ark finally went up to Jerusalem, it was carried like it was supposed to. God has laid out some specific ways of showing respect to Him in the Old Testament. And in the New Covenant, there are ways that we show honor and respect to God. And I want to challenge you today, because in the Christian world, there is so little respect for God. Now, I know people get upset with me when I say this, but it needs to be said. There is so little respect for God. Young people will sit there and text message their friends rather than stand in God's presence and worship. God can be moving and touching and healing people, and people are looking at their Facebook, and people are chatting, and people are acting. They're in church to meet the artistas, or they're in church to be doing business, and there is so little respect shown for God. May I challenge you today? Respect God.